The One Piece is real! And, fucking good. I had a dang good weekend watching through the Netflix One Piece, and it gave me more than a couple things to talk about, so why not? Just a forewarning, I will be spoiling a brief flashback from chapter 1082 because the connection to the Netflix series boggles me. This video isn't really for anyone who has only seen the Netflix series, if by chance someone stumbles onto it. I'm a huge One Piece fan, and as much as I like the idea of treating this adaptation like its own thing, I just have too much attachment to the world and its characters to pretend the original isn't right there in my head the whole time.
You know where to find me.
I didn't. Thought I was headed back to the house.
This scene might not even register to someone only seeing the Netflix One Piece for the first time, but me, and many others I'm sure, would recognize the reference to a character trait of Zoro's that literally wouldn't become a thing until several hundred chapters into the series. This new first instance also being a continuation of a running gag that didn't exist in the arc where Zoro actually found his way across the island in pretty good time once he got out of the oil trap, and that inclusion of the joke did make me laugh. Honestly, I found so much of the series to be really funny. One Piece has brought a lot of joy in my life, and no small part of it is the absurdity. Seeing that goofiness being brought to life was just inherently funny so many times. Yes, Garp has his silly dog hat even though he doesn't need to hide his face. Zeph's spice rack bandolier is probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Can we go back in time and ask Oda not to give the Den Den Mushi teeth? Because this is fucking body horror. I didn't sign up for this. Okay, the penguin statues I remember from the cover pages, but what the fuck are those? And maybe it wasn't always intentionally funny. I'm not sure why the scene with Kuro showing off his speed to Mary went on for as long as it did, but this Duracell battery just keeps fucking going. Speaking of Kuro, was there an actual production meeting on whether or not they were going to keep the coiled shit designs on Kuro's coat or not? Was there this one guy who hadn't touched the original, just sitting there and being like, no, we don't need to put literal shit designs on his coat, and was outvoted because they wanted to be faithful to Oda's vision, so he went back home to his wife and was like, they're making it bad. They're making it bad on purpose. My list of gripes is pretty short. The occasional dialogue felt weird or off. In Syrup Village, Luffy seemed to be stone cold out when everyone found out about Kuro, but he woke up knowing the whole situation already, so either I missed something, it was a weird continuity flub, or his ability to hear the voice of all things was putting in overtime. And honestly, that's basically it. I know a bunch of characters were straight up removed or reduced to cameos, but it's within the constraints of an already relatively expensive production that the staff was able to leave their own mark on the world and characters in making them their own. But especially in the first few arcs, there's a downplaying of the ideas the arcs were originally exploring in exchange for new ones, elements of the original expanded on for the new story. The first thing I want to discuss isn't the Romance Dawn arc per se, it's actually Zoro, who personality-wise is probably the most different of the Straw Hats. Manga and anime Zoro has way more emotion, he gets really pissed, sheds tears when he loses, does in fact call out the name of his finishing moves, and is really dog shit rock stupid. Netflix Zoro leans much more into the samurai idea. He's not stoic, for sure, but he does lean far more in that direction. At the very least, speaking in regards to a friend of mine whose favorite One Piece character is Zoro, they got a big part of the appeal down because he is fucking cool. In starting off his introduction with his battle against Baroque Works agent Mr. 7, they actually set up an arc for the series focusing on an angle with Zoro that's maybe not as apparent in the canon, or at least not in a way I'd thought about until the ideas from the Netflix series clicked with some of the other ones I'd been mulling over. When starting my big dumb full watch through of everything subbed for the One Piece anime, one thing I realized was just how different Zoro's induction into the crew was. Most every other Straw Hat was given the option to join, but only took it when their personal baggage was sorted out. Zoro was more or less forced to work with Luffy because of the situation, become a pirate or die. He was aware of what kind of a person Luffy was through Kobe when he made the choice, so it's not like he was being held at gunpoint by Luffy or anything. But by putting the burden of choice back in Zoro's hands, the Netflix series uses this to give him an arc regarding how and why he followed Luffy of all people when he, as he puts it, had his own thing going on. In Netflix One Piece, they use Luffy freeing Zoro in regards to the focus on freedom in the first episode. Mr. 7 and Morgan both try to recruit Zoro under threat of death if he denies them, but Luffy is a breaker of chains, not one who uses them. Zoro says no, so Luffy says okay and leaves. But what pushes them back together again is the ways in which they're similar. We see this in canon quite a few times, actually. After Luffy punches St. Charlos, Zoro sheathes his sword, noting that he'd have cut him down if Luffy hadn't moved first. In Wano, Zoro scolds Luffy for starting the raid moments before him, only to find out he got mad over Kaido's men spilling Oshiruko and changing his tune. Urouge sees Zoro act on St. Charles earlier and remarks that Zoro himself feels like a captain, wondering what kind of person Luffy is. Luffy and Zoro are the only two Straw Hats who seek to surpass and overcome other people in their dreams. The difference is that Luffy's going for something a little bit further, moving faster, and needing to be a little stronger.
Don't tell me you actually believe in him.
I don't need to. He believes in himself. Rubs off.
Zoro told Mr. 7 that he wouldn't join Baroque Works unless he was on top. Or well, in the Netflix he says that slightly less directly. Aside from referencing his future fight with Mr. 1, it establishes from the get-go that Zoro is someone who normally is an independent actor. He and Luffy are the only Straw Hats who start the series going out to accomplish their dreams. Every other one is stuck still, not moving or unsure of how. If Zoro never met Luffy, they'd both still be working towards their respective dreams, but they did in fact meet with each other. And in the Netflix series, they realize that their lofty goals are best served alongside each other. Luffy needs comrades, and Zoro can go further alongside the man who wants to exceed everyone.
Shanks always said that if the path to what you want seems too easy, then you're on the wrong path.
So even if Zoro's the Straw Hat least like his canon incarnation, he's also the one I got the most new out of in the Netflix series, which I think is a good example of how the Netflix series operates. It captures the original without being beholden to it. This is probably at its most evident with Orange Town, where more so than any other arc being adapted, it feels like a different story with familiar characters. The idea of treasure is still there with Luffy's hat.
One man's trash is another man's treasure.
But without Shushu or much focus on Mayor Boodle, this idea is given a backseat to Buggy's Big Top, his showmanship, forcing the spotlight onto him to fill the gap of being abandoned by those in his past. He tries to force Luffy to admit that he's been abandoned too, attempting to break the spirit of the unbreakable man who responds by literally not even bothering to remember who Buggy is. Even without Shanks in his life, Luffy still carries his spirit, and even if Zoro and Nami wouldn't call him a crewmate, they still fight to save him when they have no reason to, because of who he is. Nami seeing him as a different pirate than what she's used to, and Zoro looking to him as a fellow aspiring to greatness as discussed before. But where I'm most interested in this idea is actually my curiosity regarding where it came up in the production. Because if this was an aspect of Buggy's character before chapter 1082, I did not fucking see it. Buggy was prepared to follow Shanks, but he betrayed Roger's expectations when he said he didn't want to chase the One Piece. Shanks abandoned Roger, and in doing so Shanks abandoned him. Considering this alongside the Netflix, Buggy even creates a symbolic link with Buggy's power as he separates to avoid pain, an irony as it's separation that has caused him the most pain. But more than that, this chapter came out in May! Episode 2 was mostly, if not completely done by then, hello? Was Oda influenced by episode 2, or was this something I missed? I have no clue. Syrup Village was also interesting for what it expanded on, adding a twist of class to the discussion. Kuro sees Usopp and his comrades as riffraff, but he disparages the rich as well, centering his argument on achievement. The poor don't rise above their circumstances, and the wealthy subsist on what they have. In his mind, he deserves the money because through his schemes he aims to achieve. Nami, meanwhile, coming from a poor background, has less than positive feelings towards the rich, but comes around after meeting Kaya and better understanding her. And ultimately, Luffy and Zoro defeat Kuro, Sham, and Buchi because they are striving to achieve the greatest ambitions possible, leaving Kuro looking over his shoulder as he runs from his dream yet again, his abuse of trust and regular betrayal leaving him alone. The real moral of the story, though, is don't eat anything blue. While, up to this point, the Netflix series has been doing stuff differently, while there are still some major changes, Baratier and Arlong Park more or less aim to capture some of the same ideas, albeit with a number of truncated details. As much as I've been saying things of interest I got out of the Netflix show, I don't think I enjoy it more than the original, but that's not what this is about. Having Zeph and Garp argue about the next generation and still making me tear up at Sanji's flashback and farewell was alright in my books. Zoro vs. Mihawk was great. Keeping Nami for Mihawk and adding the drinking scene with Zoro was a great lead-in for Arlong Park. Arlong relying on Nami despite proclaiming Fishman's superiority is a great way to get his failings across. I could mope about what was missing, but that wouldn't change how much fun I had. I am curious about how the difference in fishfolk being more spread out across the world will pan out when we get to Fishman Island, as compared to canon where Otohime wanted fishfolk to get closer with humans so they could better understand each other. But that is a season 7 or 8 thing, and they only just announced a second one. The enhanced focus on the marine characters could actually lead to some really neat stuff later down the line. Having more friendship moments between Luffy and Kobe would change the Water 7 scene to be less of a, oh shit, it's those guys, and they're stronger now, to a more heartfelt reunion between friends. And Garp's challenge to Luffy works in setting up the idea of growing up in a new way, with Luffy directly having to fight for his childish ideals against a parent figure reluctant to let go. his release from Garp setting up for his entrance to the Grand Line, where the world of adults will make him stumble and fall as he has to keep finding ways to get back up again. But all this talk on the future is speculative. We're still a ways out from Season 2, I'm sure, and they might be utterly screwed when they find out some of the things that Oda's been cooking. But until the nail in that coffin, I'm behind the Netflix series. It gave me a fun weekend binge, the moments between the Straw Hats made me feel warm and good, and it also gave me a bunch to think about, both about the original and in regards to adaptation and the ways it can be done.
Stories can have different points.
Thanks for watching, but before I go, yes, the Wano video is still happening. I've had some production hiccups, but it's well underway. I also have another One Piece video I plan on getting up this year, centered around Egghead, but without actually discussing much of Egghead, so keep your eye out. I've got some other stuff, not One Piece related, that will likely come out next year. That's it.